Alright, so today we're diving deep into some serious military history. But before we get to all the, clashing armies and the legendary battles of ancient Europe, we kind of need to rewind the clock a bit further. I think of it like this, to really get those epic clashes that shaped the continent, we got to explore the ground, on which they were fought, the cultures that clashed, and the very origins of the people involved.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like trying to understand a complex tapestry without examining the individual threads that create that larger picture.
And to begin weaving this tapestry, I guess we got to start with a myth.
A myth?
Yeah, the myth of Europa.
Okay.
It might seem like an odd place to begin a deep dive, into military history. But trust me, there's a method to our madness.
I believe you. So, this myth, why is it important?
Well, it points us towards the Minoan civilization on Crete.
Oh!
Yeah, and this civilization, while not really known for, military might, they played a crucial role in shaping the cultural landscape of early Europe. So the story of Europa, for those who need a refresher, it's a princess abducted and taken to Crete. She gives birth to Minos, who becomes king, and bam, the Minoan civilization takes root. Okay, now the details, the abduction, Zeus, a bull, all that, those are up for debate. But the story itself highlights two key points.
Okay, where the first?
It establishes the Minoans as a foundational ancestor of European civilization.
I say.
And second, it suggests their connection to those older, more established powers in the East.
Okay, so like Mesopotamia and Egypt.
Exactly.
Interesting.
It's like Europe's origin story.
Yeah.
With a healthy dose of intrigue and maybe some historical truth woven in.
I like it.
And speaking of connections, we can't ignore Crete's strategic location.
True, very strategic.
Right in the Mediterranean.
Right in the middle of everything.
Picture this. It's 2300 BC. The Akkadian Empire's booming to the east. Egypt's already a powerhouse to the south. And Crete sits smack dab in the middle of all the action.
Lao, prime real estate.
They weren't simply passive bystanders either.
How I'd that?
The Minoans were skilled seafarers and traders.
I did not know that.
Yep, and this central location put them at the crossroads of a bustling ancient world. They interacted with these powerful neighbors, absorbing influences and spreading their own culture throughout the region.
So like a cultural exchange program.
Exactly, except with ships and ancient trade goods instead of backpacks and selfies.
That's a great analogy.
But before the Minoans arrived, who were the original inhabitants of this region, what were the building blocks, so to speak, of the people who would later engage in those epic battles we're leading up to?
That's a great question. And, genetic studies suggest that the first inhabitants of Crete were descendants of early humans who migrated from Africa and Asia. And this is a crucial point because it speaks to the genetic heritage of many European peoples today. It's a reminder that human migration and intermingling over millennia played a huge role in shaping the very DNA of those who would later form the armies and empires we'll be discussing.
It's like tracing the roots of a family tree, but on a continental scale.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's something that always intrigues me about early Europe.
What's that?
Unlike Mesopotamia, Egypt, or China, it didn't seem to develop a written language, cities, or metallurgy in the same way or on the same timeline. It's almost as if they were late to the civilization game.
That's an interesting observation. And it's true that Europe didn't have what we might call an original civilization in the same way those other regions did.
Right.
But that doesn't mean the continent was empty or insignificant. Remember, we're talking about a place that was home to early humans like Homo heidelbergensis and Neanderthals over 1 million years ago?
Right. Europe has a human story that stretches back incredibly far, even if it took a different path than some of those other early civilizations.
Exactly. And let's not forget the arrival of Homo sapiens from Africa and their subsequent interactions with Neanderthals.
Oh, right.
That 2010 study showing 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA in non-African populations is a powerful reminder of those early encounters. So even though Europe's path to what we traditionally consider civilization might have been different, its human story is just as ancient and complex.
Absolutely, and that complexity only deepens as we move closer to the time period we're focusing on.
Okay.
Around 10,000 BC, as the Ice Age ended, people across the globe started transitioning from hunter-gatherers to agricultural societies.
Right, huge shift.
This shift is crucial, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. This shift to agriculture is arguably one of the most significant developments in human history. It led to settled communities, food surpluses, and ultimately the ability to support larger populations and more complex social structures. But Europe, with its harsher climate compared to the Near East or Asia, was a bit slower to adopt agriculture.
It makes you wonder, though, What were those early Europeans focusing on, if not solely on agriculture? Was there something else that occupied their time and energy?
Well, we know from archaeological evidence that they had a rich artistic tradition, creating cave paintings and intricate carvings. This suggests a focus on cultural development that may have, in its own way, laid the groundwork for the later flourishing of European civilization.
It's as if they were cultivating a different kind of seed, one that would eventually blossom into the philosophical and artistic achievements of the associate with ancient Greece and Rome. But eventually agriculture did take hold in Europe, right?
Yes, and it was spurred in part by later migrations from Asia, bringing with them crops and livestock that were better suited to the European climate. We see the emergence of small agricultural communities and even genetic mutations like later skin pigmentation around 7000 BC as those early Europeans adapted to their environment.
These are the beginnings of what we might recognize as distinctively European traits. And it's around 2000 BC that things really start to get interesting on Crete with the development of the Minoan civilization, right?
Yes, that's right. This is when we see the construction of those large, impressive palaces like Knossos, and critically, the development of their own writing system, Linear A, around 1700 BC.
Linear A.
It's tantalizing because we haven't deciphered it yet, but it points to strong connections with Egypt and Mesopotamia, suggesting a vibrant exchange of ideas and cultural practices.
It's like having a locked treasure chest filled with secrets about Minoan society and their place in the ancient world.
It is.
And it's amazing how the myth of Europa we started with actually reflects that exchange of ideas and culture in a symbolic way.
Absolutely. The story of King Minos, the Minotaur, and the Labyrinth, they all hint at a real civilization, with its own unique beliefs and practices, likely influenced by their contact with those larger powers to the east.
And of course we have Arthur Evans' discovery of the Knossos Palace in 1900, which really brought the Minoans to life. It wasn't just a myth, they were a real vibrant civilization. And the intricate palace complex, the evidence of bull worship, it all paints a vivid picture of their society. But what's striking is that, despite their cultural achievements and their mastery of seafaring and trade, the Minoans weren't known for their military prowess, were they?
That's an important distinction to make. While they certainly had some defensive capabilities, their focus seems to have been on trade art and cultural exchange, not on building a powerful military force. And this may have contributed to their eventual decline.
So we've got this intriguing civilization on Crete influencing the cultural landscape of early Europe, but not necessarily leaving a military legacy. What happened next? Did they just fade away peacefully?
Not exactly peacefully. Remember, we're talking about a period of history where conflict was a constant presence. Around 1600 BC, a new power rose on mainland Greece, the Mycenaeans, and their story is one of warfare expansion and a warrior culture that would have a profound impact on the trajectory of European history, especially its military development.
This is where we see a real shift in the landscape of early Europe, wouldn't you say? We've gone from a civilization focused on trade and cultural exchange to one that seems to have embraced warfare as a core part of its identity.
Precisely. The Mycenaeans were skilled warriors, builders of fortified cities, and they left behind a wealth of evidence highlighting their military prowess, including weapons, armor, and even artwork depicting scenes of battle.
It's like looking through a window into a warrior culture, seeing the tools and imagery that define their world. What can you tell us about their weaponry and combat strategies? Do they have any innovations that would influence later military developments?
They were masters of bronzeworking, crafting a wide range of weapons and armor, from swords and spears to shields and helmets. And one of their key innovations was the development of sophisticated chariots for warfare, giving them a tactical advantage on the battlefields of the time.
Chariots. Now that's what I call bringing some serious firepower to the ancient world. But who were they using these weapons and chariots against? Was it just the Minoans, or did they have other rivals and enemies?
While the exact relationship between the Minoans and Mycenaeans is still debated, there's evidence suggesting both cooperation and conflict. Some scholars believe the Mycenaeans may have even conquered Crete, contributing to the decline of the Minoan civilization. But their ambitions went far beyond Crete. The Mycenaeans were an expansionist people, constantly vying for power and control both amongst themselves and against other cultures across the Aegean Sea.
So they weren't just content with defending their own territory. They actively sought to expand their influence and dominance through military might. It's like a preview of the kinds of empires and conquests that will come to define European history in the centuries that follow.
That's a great observation. The Mycenaean period is crucial for understanding the roots of European warfare. Their warrior culture, their expansionist tendencies, and their constant struggle for power set a precedent for the patterns of conflict that would characterize much of European history. They weren't just fighting battles, they were shaping the very landscape on which those future conflicts would unfold.
And when we talk about the Mycenaeans and their impact on European warfare, we can't ignore one of the most famous conflicts of the ancient world, the Trojan War. It's a story that's captivated imaginations for centuries. How much of it is myth and how much is historical fact?
That's a million-dollar question, isn't it? The Trojan War, as recounted in Homer's Iliad, is a tale of epic proportions filled with heroes, gods, and dramatic battles. And while it's been embellished and mythologized over time, archaeological evidence suggests there may be some truth to the core story, a conflict between the Mycenaeans and the city of Troy, located in modern-day Turkey.
So there's likely a historical basis for this legendary war, even if the details are shrouded in myth and poetry. What do we know about the city of Troy itself? Was it a formidable opponent for the Mycenaeans or a relatively easy target?
Troy was strategically located, controlling access to the Black Sea, and archaeological remains reveal a city with impressive walls and defensive structures. It wasn't a pushover capturing. Troy would have required a significant military effort, which aligns with the lengthy siege described in the Iliad.
So this wasn't just a minor skirmish. We're talking about a major conflict between two powerful forces. And according to the traditional account, it was sparked by the abduction of Helen, wife of the Spartan king Menelaus by Paris, a prince of Troy. Whether this was the actual cause or just a poetic way to frame the conflict is debatable, but it speaks to the power of personal narratives in shaping our understanding of history, even though shrouded in myth and legend.
Absolutely. The story of Helen's abduction has resonated through the centuries, capturing the imagination and fueling countless artistic interpretations. But beyond the romantic tale, the Trojan War, if it occurred as described, would have had significant historical consequences.
What can you tell us about the war's impact on the Mycenaeans themselves? Did they emerge from the conflict stronger, or did the victory come at a cost?
The traditional account tells of a Mycenaean victory after a long and bloody siege culminating in the famous Trojan horse tactic. But even in victory, there were consequences. The conflict weakened them, depleted their resources, and may have contributed to their eventual decline. It's a reminder that even the victors in war often bear the scars of conflict.
It's a powerful reminder that military victories don't always translate into long-term stability or strength. What happened to the Mycenaeans after the Trojan War? Did their civilization simply fade away?
Around 1100 BC, Mycenaean civilization collapsed. The exact causes are still debated, but theories range from climate change and natural disasters to internal unrest and invasions by other groups. What we know is that their palaces were destroyed, their writing system disappeared, and Greece entered a period known as the Greek Dark Ages.
Dark Ages. It sounds like a period of chaos and decline. Did they lose everything the Mycenaeans had built? Did their influence on the development of European warfare simply vanish?
Not entirely. While much knowledge and many cultural achievements were lost during this period, some elements of Mycenaean civilization survived, passed down through oral traditions, and later influencing the development of classical Greece. It's like a fire that burns out but leaves behind embers that can reignite under the right conditions.
So the Mycenaean influence didn't disappear completely.
Yeah.
It was transformed, reshaped, and eventually contributed to the rise of one of the most influential civilizations in human history, classical Greece.
Precisely. And as we move out of the Dark Ages and into the rise of classical Greece, we'll see how those seeds planted in a time of conflict and upheaval by the Mycenaeans eventually blossomed into a civilization that would redefine warfare, politics, philosophy, and art, leaving an indelible mark on Western civilization as a whole.
We've gone from myth and legend to the rise and fall of a warrior culture, and now we're on the cusp of the new era, one filled with epic battles and strategic innovations that will forever shape the course of military history. I'm ready to dive into the world of classical Greece and see how those Mycenaean threads weave their way into this new tapestry of conflict and conquest. Right, so we're back, and we're continuing our exploration of, the roots of European military might. We've journeyed from the myths of Europa to the rise and fall of the Mycenaeans, a civilization whose warrior culture really laid the groundwork for the conflicts that would shape the continent. Now we're stepping onto the battlefields of classical Greece, period that not only give us, legendary warriors and epic clashes, but also fundamentally changed the way wars were fought.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how, classical Greece emerged from that period of decline. The Greek Dark Ages we discussed earlier, right? It's a testament to the enduring power of ideas and the human capacity for innovation, even in the face of adversity,
Is like a phoenix rising from the ashes, taking the embers of Mycenaean culture and forging them into something new and powerful. But what was it about this period that makes it so classical? Why do we still study and admire it today, especially when it comes to military history?
Well, classical Greece represents a flourishing of human achievement in so many areas: philosophy, art, literature, political thought, and of course, military strategy.
Of course.
It's a period that laid the foundation for much of Western civilization, and its military innovations had a ripple effect across the centuries.
So we're not just talking about beautiful statues and philosophical debates here. We're talking about a period that revolutionized the way battles were fought, with tactics and strategies that would influence military thinking for generations to come.
Absolutely. And one of the most significant developments of this era was the emergence of the hoplite phalanx, a military formation that became synonymous with Greek warfare.
The hoplite phalanx. It's a term that gets thrown around a lot in military history discussions. Can you break it down for us? What made it so effective and how did it change the dynamics of battle?
Okay, so imagine a tightly packed formation of heavily armored infantry, each soldier carrying a spear and a large round shield, advancing as a single, nearly impenetrable unit.
Okay.
The hoplites would line up shoulder to shoulder, their shields overlapping to create a wall of bronze that protected the entire formation.
It sounds like a moving wall of muscle and metal advancing with a sense of unstoppable momentum. I could see why it would be intimidating to face on the battlefield.
It was incredibly effective, both defensively and offensively.
I bet.
The shield wall provided a high degree of protection, while the massed spear thrusts could break through enemy lines. But the phalanx wasn't just about brute force. It required discipline, coordination, and a sense of unity that reflected the values of the Greek polis, the city-state.
So it wasn't just about individual warriors showing off their strength and courage. It was about fighting as a cohesive unit, a reflection of the collective spirit of the Greek city-states.
Exactly. Each hoplite fought not just for his own glory, but for the good of the polis, and this sense of shared purpose made them a formidable force on the battlefield.
But didn't the Greeks also employ other military elements like cavalry and archers? How did those fit into their overall strategy?
While cavalry and archers played supporting roles, the core of the Greek army was the hoplite infantry. Cavalry was used for flanking maneuvers, harassing enemy formations, and exploiting breakthroughs, while archers provided ranged support. But the decisive element, the hammer that struck the final blow, was often the hoplite phalanx.
So a well-balanced force with clear roles and tactics. And I'm guessing they put this military might to good use, right? After all, this is classical Greece. We're talking about a period filled with famous battles and legendary conflicts.
Indeed, classical Greece was a time of intense warfare, both between the Greek city-states themselves as they vied for power and influence, and against external enemies, most notably the vast Persian Empire.
Ah, yes. The Greco-Persian Wars. Those are some of the most epic clashes in ancient history, battles that have inspired countless stories and films. We're talking about Thermopylae, Marathon, Salamis, names that resonate with anyone who's even remotely interested in military history.
These conflicts are legendary for a reason. They pitted the relatively small and independent Greek city-states against the might of the Persian Empire, a seemingly unstoppable force that dwarfed them in terms of manpower and resources. And yet, against all odds, the Greeks, through their superior tactics, their discipline, and their unwavering determination, achieved a series of stunning victories.
It's the ultimate David versus Goliath story, isn't it? But were these victories simply about defending their homeland from invasion, or did they have broader implications for the development of Europe and Western civilization as a whole?
The Greco-Persian Wars were a turning point in European history. They ensured the survival of Greek civilization with its emphasis on democracy, philosophy, and individual freedom values that would have a profound impact on the development of Western culture. And from a military standpoint, the Greek victories demonstrated the effectiveness of their tactics and innovations, proving that even a smaller force with the right strategy and determination could overcome a larger and seemingly more powerful enemy.
It's mind-blowing to think that these ancient battles had such far-reaching consequences, shaping not just the political landscape of the ancient world, but also the values and ideas that would eventually spread throughout Europe and beyond. But even in history, there were challenges, right? Did the Greek city-states end up fighting amongst themselves?
Sadly, yes. Despite their shared language and culture, the Greek city-states were fiercely independent, and their rivalries often boiled over into open conflict. The most famous of these conflicts was the Peloponnesian War, a decades-long struggle between Athens and Sparta, two of the most powerful city-states in Greece.
Ah, Sparta. The very name conjures up images of warriors' discipline and an almost fanatical devotion to military prowess. But how much of that is Hollywood hype, and what was their actual role in the Peloponnesian War?
Sparta was indeed a highly militaristic society with a unique social structure and a rigorous military training system that began at childhood. They represented a very different model of Greek society compared to the more democratic and intellectually focused Athens. And in the Peloponnesian War, these two contrasting visions of Greek civilization clashed on the battlefield.
So it wasn't just a fight for territory or resources, it was a clash of ideologies, a conflict between two fundamentally different ways of life.
Exactly. The Peloponnesian War was a brutal and protracted conflict, one that ultimately weakened the Greek world as a whole, leaving them vulnerable to external threats. It's a tragic reminder that even the most brilliant civilizations can be brought down by internal divisions and the inability to find common ground.
It's a theme that echoes throughout history, isn't it?
Yeah.
Internal conflicts often pave the way for external conquest. And in the case of Greece, the weakening caused by the Peloponnesian War left them vulnerable to conquest by Philip II of Macedon, the father of Alexander the Great. We've come full circle, haven't we? From the myths and legends of early Europe to the rise of the Mycenaeans and their warrior culture, we've arrived at the doorstep of one of history's greatest military commanders.
And it's important to remember that Alexander's conquest, which spread Greek culture and influence across vast swaths of territory, were built upon the military innovations and traditions established by those earlier civilizations. The hoplite phalanx, the strategic thinking, the emphasis on discipline and unity, these elements forged in the fires of conflict were integral to Alexander's success.
It's fascinating to see how these threads of military history are woven together. From the earliest encounters between migrating humans to the emergence of powerful city-states and the rise of legendary conquerors, it's a reminder that history isn't just a series of isolated events. It's an interconnected tapestry with each thread contributing to a larger picture.
And as we conclude our deep dive into the roots of European military might, it's worth pondering the enduring legacy of these ancient civilizations. Their ideas, their innovations, their conflicts, they all played a role in shaping the world we live in today. From the tactics we use on the battlefield to the values we hold dear, the echoes of ancient Greece can be felt across the centuries.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it? To realize that the battles fought so long ago still resonate in our world today. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of early European military history. We have journeyed through myth and legend, witnessed the rise and fall of empires, and explored the tactics and technologies that shaped the course of warfare. And as we move forward in our exploration of military history, we'll continue to uncover those hidden connections, those fascinating threads that weave together the grand narrative of human conflict and innovation.